Night falls on the Great Plains, not gently, but like a curtain pulled tight across the world. The wind fades first, then the trees still, and finally, even the animals go quiet, leaving only darkness so thick it swallows shapes whole. For most people, night is a warning, a place where vision collapses, sound betrays you, and every step feels louder than it should. But here's the strange part. For many Native American hunters and scouts, night was not a danger at all. It was an advantage. It was a landscape they could read, navigate, and even disappear into, as if their bodies blended with the land itself. Settlers wrote journals describing warriors who appeared from nowhere, emerging only when they chose to be seen. Soldiers told stories of footsteps they never heard, even on dry leaves. Hunters spoke of companions who vanished behind shadows as if the night absorbed them. These accounts sound mystical, almost supernatural, until you look deeper. The real explanation is far more astonishing and far more scientific than any legend. Here's the catch. They were not invisible because of magic. They were invisible because they understood darkness better than anyone else. They mastered a system of movement and perception built from centuries of observation, a system modern soldiers, trackers, and survival schools still try to imitate today. Most people walk through darkness hoping their senses will adapt. Native Americans trained their bodies so the night became an extension of their senses. Imagine standing in a forest with no moon above you. You cannot see where your next step falls. You cannot predict which branch will crack. And you cannot hear yourself breathe over your own heartbeat. Now imagine someone moving behind you, silently, easily, every step placed with precision so perfect that even dry twigs do not protest. That contrast, your struggle versus their mastery, is the true starting point of this story. The pain point is simple: humans are loud. Our modern walking style forces weight quickly onto the ground, crushing leaves and breaking branches. We stare directly at objects, flooding our retinas with too much light. We breathe hard when anxious, vibrating muscles and disturbing the air around us. Everything about the way we move at night works against us. But Native American hunters faced a different reality. They relied on silence to approach bison herds. They depended on night to track deer without being seen. They used darkness to approach enemy camps or escape danger. Every sound could cost them food, safety, or life itself. Failure was not inconvenient, it was fatal. So they built a system where silence was the foundation, awareness was the tool, and movement was the science. The weird part is how modern science now confirms what they learned centuries ago. Studies show that shifting your vision slightly to the side activates rod cells up to 4 times more than staring straight ahead. Slow, split-weight steps reduce ground noise by more than half. Controlling breath stabilizes muscle vibrations and sharpens hearing. None of this required technology, only understanding. And this understanding shaped a truth that feels almost unreal today, in the right conditions. A skilled Native American scout could stand just 10 feet away from an unaware person and remain completely undetected. That is the world we are about to enter. A world where footsteps disappear, shadows speak, and night becomes a partner instead of an obstacle. The deeper you look into the quiet movements of Native American hunters, the more you realize that nothing about their nighttime skill comes from instinct alone. It comes from a precise understanding of how the human body behaves in darkness. Most people think night blinds us, but for them, darkness simply revealed a different set of rules. And once you understand those rules, the night becomes easier to read. The first rule revolves around vision, not sharper eyesight, but smarter eyesight. When people stare directly into the dark, they unknowingly shut off their best night sensors. Cone cells dominate the center of the eye, and these cells are almost useless without light. But rod cells, which detect faint movement and subtle shapes, sit along the edges. Native scouts didn't stare straight ahead. They shifted their gaze slightly to the side, letting darkness come into focus on its own. This simple adjustment brightened their world more than any flame could. Astronomers still use the same method today to see distant stars that vanish under direct vision. The second rule concerns sound. Most footsteps are loud, not because of the ground, but because of how fast weight hits it. We commit our full mass in a single drop. They never did. Their steps touched softly, tested gently, and settled slowly, creating a chain of micro-corrections that kept the ground from protesting. Every step was a question to the earth, asked before any weight was allowed to fall. The physics is straightforward. By splitting force into smaller phases, sound drops dramatically. Cats do it naturally. Native hunters learned to do it deliberately. Breath created the third rule. Silent walking is impossible with a loud body. Rapid breathing shakes muscles and vibrates the chest, creating tiny sounds your ears can't detect, but the forest can. So they trained the breath to move through the nose, slow and controlled, like a steady thread that held the whole body together. Calm breath led to steady muscles. Steady muscles led to quiet movement. What modern instructors call tactical breathing existed in native traditions long before the term was invented. The fourth rule grew from diet. Night vision depends heavily on vitamin A, retinol, and fat absorption. Hunters consumed liver, dark berries, animal fat, and other foods rich in the nutrients that strengthen rod cells. Their eyes adapted far faster than the average person's, not by luck, but by biology shaped through generations of practical knowledge. It wasn't mystical. It was nutritional science, refined through experience. But the most revealing rule is the one no textbook teaches. Darkness is not something you see through. It's something you sense through. Footsteps revealed soil density. Wind patterns revealed movement. Temperature shifts revealed where animals slept. A single twig snapping miles away traveled farther at night, and they listened for it the way sailors listen for waves. Vision blended with hearing, balance, breath, and touch until every sense formed one continuous map. Moving through darkness became less about what the eyes could capture, and more about what the whole body could interpret. And once every sense moved in agreement, sight guiding breath, breath guiding muscle, muscle guiding footfall, silence was no longer something to achieve. It was something that naturally happened. A skill that took form the moment the body understood how to behave with the night instead of against it, allowing their movements to merge effortlessly with the tools and techniques they carried into the forest. Silent movement may begin as an understanding of vision, breath, and sound, but it becomes real only when translated into technique. And the techniques developed by Native American hunters were not random habits. They were systems shaped through repetition, refined through generations, and tested in forests where a single mistake could cost food or safety. Once you see how these movements work, the quiet they produced no longer feels mysterious. It feels engineered. The foundation of this system begins with the way a foot meets the earth. Most people lift their legs high and strike the ground with the flat of the foot, letting momentum decide the rest. Hunters did something entirely different. They lowered the foot slowly, touching the outer edge first, almost like brushing the surface. Only when that narrow blade of the foot confirmed the ground was safe did the rest of the foot roll inward. This gentle outward to inward sweep came to be known as the fox walk, not because it mimicked a fox, but because it matched the logic of any animal that moves without alarming the forest. The unusual part is how much this simple roll changes your relationship with the earth. Instead of crashing into the ground, you negotiate with it. But the fox walk is only the beginning. Darkness changes terrain, and the same step cannot be used everywhere. When the ground turned soft or wet, hunters reversed the process. They let the heel touch first, sinking slightly into mud or damp soil to feel its depth before shifting weight forward. This prevented slipping, but it also prevented the loud suction noise wet ground usually produces. It was a different movement for a different surface, and each variation existed because silence adapts to the land, not the other way around. Then comes the technique that surprises almost everyone who studies it. Hunters rarely committed their full weight in a single motion. They divided each step into layers of pressure. A touch, a gentle test. Only then, a slow transfer of weight downward. This layering allowed them to stand half-frozen in place for 20 or 30 seconds, letting the forest settle before moving again. It is the opposite of modern walking, where momentum pushes us forward even when we should pause. Here, patience reveals more than speed ever could. And none of these movements work if the body above the legs shakes with tension. That is why breath becomes a tool, not simply a function. Hunters breathed through the nose, long and even, as if smoothing the air inside their bodies. Slow breath quieted the ribcage, softened the shoulders, and removed the small vibrations that make dry grass tremble or fabric whisper. Silence begins in the lungs long before it reaches the feet. But tools for the night were not limited to movement. Darkness demanded another kind of preparation, one that sharpened the senses to the point where motion became effortless. Smoke training helped widen the pupils, speeding the eye's transition between light and shadow. Foods rich in fat and vitamin A kept rod cells active long after the sun disappeared. Time spent in dim light taught the mind to read silhouettes instead of seeking shapes. Hunters strengthened their senses the same way others strengthen muscle, through deliberate exposure, careful diet, and controlled discomfort. The forest does not reveal its secrets to untrained eyes. And as all these tools converged, something remarkable happened. Vision, breath, and movement no longer felt like separate skills. They fused into one instinctive flow where the foot responded to what the eyes sensed, and the breath responded to what the foot felt. Silence emerged not from effort, but from alignment, the body acting as a single, unified instrument tuned to the frequency of the night. The darkness itself became easier to move through, as if each technique opened a new pathway hidden from those who rushed or forced their steps. Night movement becomes truly alive only when technique meets terrain. Darkness reshapes the world, turning every ridge into a shadow, every branch into a question, and every sound into a clue. For Native American hunters, these conditions were not obstacles. They were invitations to move differently, with a rhythm measured not in steps but in awareness. And when all the tools of silent walking and night vision merge into practice, the forest becomes something entirely new. A scout beginning a night approach never rushed into the trees. He paused first, letting his eyes loosen from daylight habits. Direct vision softened into sidelong awareness. Breath slowed until it became a quiet pulse through the nose. Shoulders relaxed. Knees bent just enough to lower the center of gravity. This posture alone changed everything. The body stopped acting like a human pushing through darkness and began acting like a creature shaped for it. The first steps were always small, tiny, measured. Each foot moved forward as if it belonged to someone else, touching the earth lightly, barely committing weight. Here's the interesting part. The scout did not think about where to step next. He thought about how the ground spoke back. A twig might shift slightly under the outer blade of the foot. Dry leaves might whisper. Soft soil might sink. The feedback determined the motion, not the mind's impatience. Silence grows when movement listens. When the forest thickened, the pace slowed even more. Hunters often stopped for 20 or 30 seconds to let the environment reset. Stillness gave them new information. If the wind brushed grass in one direction, movement aligned with it. If an owl paused mid-call, they waited for the next cue. If snow muffled the world too perfectly, they checked for predators or game lying ahead. Each pause was not hesitation. It was calibration. And then came the way they used shadows, not avoiding them but folding into them. A scout never crossed open moonlit patches unless absolutely necessary. Instead, he slipped along the edges where tree trunks and brush cut the light into fragments. The human eye is naturally drawn to motion in bright spaces. So they stayed where the eye hesitates, gliding through dim corridors carved by branches and slope. This created an effect settlers wrote about often. They were standing there, and then they were gone. But nothing supernatural happened. They simply moved where sight loses confidence. In deeper darkness, night vision changed from eyesight to full-body perception. Soles of the feet sensed tiny vibrations that hinted at animals stepping far ahead. Fingers brushed tree bark to orient direction. Breath matched the rhythm of crickets, frogs, or wind to stay hidden inside natural sound patterns. Even temperature shifts mattered. Cool air sinking near the ground revealed hollows or creek beds. Warmer currents rising through trees signaled recent movement from animals or other humans. These subtle layers of information built a map no lantern could match. Groups moved with equal precision. When several hunters traveled together, every person mirrored the pace of the one in front. No one stepped immediately after another. Each waited for the earth to settle from the previous footfall. This staggered rhythm softened the noise of multiple bodies until it felt like a single presence drifting through the forest. Communication happened through touch or faint gestures, never through whispers that traveled too far in the night air. Even the way they carried objects mattered. Weapons and gear were bound tightly in leather to prevent rattling. Clothing was chosen for quiet fibers, avoiding materials that scraped against bark. Hair was tied back. Loose items were secured. Every detail shaped the sound profile of the body, and nothing was left to chance. And as the night deepened, technique dissolved into instinct. Movement no longer felt like a sequence of rules. It became something effortless, a glide through darkness where the world revealed itself through sensations instead of sight. Once the body entered that state, silence stopped being a goal and started being the natural way the forest allowed them to move. When movement, breath, and awareness blend seamlessly into the night, the results become almost unreal to anyone who has never experienced such quiet. The immediate benefit is obvious: silence. Silence so deep that footsteps disappear into the earth, leaving even the most alert animals unaware of a human presence. But the deeper benefits are far more interesting, because they reveal why these techniques lasted for generations and why so many observers describe Native American hunters as walking ghosts under the moon. The first benefit is control. Every deliberate step prevented unwanted noise, but it also prevented wasted energy. Slow, balanced motion kept muscles relaxed, reducing fatigue during long night hunts. A person walking with tension burns energy fast, while someone who distributes weight in layers moves far more efficiently. This meant hunters could travel farther with less effort, conserving strength for moments when speed genuinely mattered. The second benefit is awareness. By shifting vision away from direct focus and letting the rods activate, darkness became sharper rather than more threatening. Shapes emerged instead of disappearing. Movement revealed itself instead of hiding. When combined with the ability to sense subtle vibrations or airflow changes, the night transformed into a readable landscape. A hunter no longer guessed what lay ahead. He understood it by listening to the ground, watching the shadows, and feeling the temperature on his skin. This heightened awareness improved tracking, navigation, safety, and success on every journey. Another benefit lies in the harmony between the body and the environment. Silence is not simply the absence of sound. It is the presence of balance. A person moving quietly avoids startling animals, avoids alerting enemies, and avoids drawing attention to their path. Camps remained undetected. Hunts remained productive. Even travel through unfamiliar territories became safer because silence erased traces that might expose a group's presence. Settlers and soldiers often wrote about warriors vanishing into the forest. But the truth is simpler. They left almost nothing behind for the senses to catch. And then there is the benefit few people consider: community cohesion. Moving quietly through darkness required coordination between individuals, teaching patience, cooperation, and trust. Everyone adjusted to the pace of the group, listened for the same cues, and shared the same map built from shadows and sound. Silence became a form of communication, replacing words with instinctive timing. It unified the body, the group, and the landscape into one continuous rhythm. More than anything else, these techniques protected life. Silence allowed hunters to approach game humanely, avoiding unnecessary suffering. It allowed families to travel safely at night. It allowed scouts to observe threats without being seen. And it allowed entire communities to survive in environments where noise could reveal location, intention, or vulnerability. What began as a necessity slowly evolved into a refined way of moving through the world. A way that turned darkness from a place of danger into a companion that shielded, guided, and informed. And in that relationship between people and night, a deeper message begins to take shape. The quiet mastery of night movement reveals something far greater than technique. It reflects a worldview shaped by patience, humility, and an intimate relationship with the land. Silence was never just a hunting skill or a method of survival. It was a philosophy, a way of existing inside a world that speaks constantly through wind, soil, and shadow. When people learn to walk without disturbing the earth, they also learned to listen without interrupting it. This harmony carried a message older than memory. The night was not an enemy to be feared or conquered. It was a living space that rewarded respect and punished carelessness. Hunters moved softly, not because silence made them powerful, but because it made them aware of their part in the larger landscape. Every choice, where to step, where to pause, where to breathe, acknowledged that humans were only one thread woven into a far greater tapestry of creatures, sounds, and rhythms. Here's the part modern life often forgets. Silence teaches responsibility. When every footstep avoids harm, the forest becomes less a resource and more a relationship. Animals are approached gently. Tracks are left light. Movements cause no disruption. This ethic of minimal impact shaped every corner of native communities, from traveling paths to harvesting practices to the way knowledge was passed down. It was not enough to survive the night. One had to move through it in a way that kept it alive for those who followed. The techniques of silent walking and night vision also preserved memory. Skills were learned through experience, repeated in family teachings, and shared through stories that explained how darkness behaves and how humans should behave within it. Every generation added refinement. Every lesson held meaning. Quiet movement became a form of cultural continuity, binding people not only to each other, but to their ancestors who walked the same trails long before them. And what remains most striking is how relevant these ideas still are. Modern society drowns in noise, mechanical noise, digital noise, mental noise. Yet the night has not changed. It still rewards those who slow their breathing, adjust their vision, and let the world speak first. When we follow the old rhythm, even briefly, we rediscover something essential. Awareness sharpens when noise fades. Perhaps that is the lasting gift of these ancient techniques. They remind us that wisdom is not always loud or complicated. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and rooted in understanding rather than domination. Moving softly through darkness is more than a skill. It is a way of honoring the world, acknowledging that survival and respect walk side by side. And in that gentle union between human and night, a simple truth still echoes across generations. When we learn to walk softly, the world reveals more than we ever thought possible.